1945. Somewhere in the Pacific. The white flash vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. For several terrifying seconds, Jack Harlan thought he had gone blind. The ocean below glowed silver beneath the storm clouds, and his damaged P-38 rattled violently through the sky like it was about to tear itself apart. Smoke filled the cockpit. Warning alarms screamed. His left engine was dying. Jack gripped the controls harder. "Come on! Come on!" The aircraft barely responded. Rain slammed against the canopy, while lightning flashed across the clouds. Every instinct told him to bail out into the black Pacific below. But pilots in the Pacific knew what waited in those waters. Sharks. Storms. Currents strong enough to carry bodies thousands of miles. And sometimes Japanese patrol boats. Jack forced the nose upward. The surviving engine roared angrily. He glanced back toward the horizon. The strange white glow was fading now, hidden behind clouds and rain. But even from miles away, he knew he had witnessed something impossible. No ordinary bomb could create light like that. No ordinary explosion could shake the sky itself. His radio crackled suddenly. "Captain Harlan, report your status." The voice sounded cold. Controlled. Not military panic. Not concern. Jack frowned. "This is Harlan. I'm damaged and losing altitude." "What the hell was that explosion?" Silence. Then, "Return to base immediately." "That doesn't answer my question." Another pause. Finally the voice answered. "You saw nothing." The transmission ended. Jack stared at the radio in disbelief. "You saw nothing." The words stayed with him for the rest of his life. He barely made it back to the carrier. The landing was brutal. One wheel collapsed on impact, and the P-38 skidded sideways across the deck in a shower of sparks. Crewmen rushed forward as smoke poured from the ruined engine. Jack climbed out shaking with exhaustion. Before he could speak, two military police officers approached him. "Captain Jack Harlan?" "That's me. You're ordered to report immediately." "No medical check?" "No, sir." They escorted him below deck. Not to the briefing room. Not to intelligence. To a locked compartment deep inside the carrier. A man in civilian clothes waited there smoking a cigarette. He looked older than everyone else aboard. Calm. Sharp-eyed. Dangerous. The kind of man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. Jack sat carefully. The civilian studied him. "You flew well today, Captain. What was that mission?" "You're not authorized to ask." "One of my pilots died." The man ignored the outburst. "You experienced equipment malfunction during escort operations." "That is the official report." Jack leaned forward angrily. "I saw that explosion." The civilian's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, Captain. You didn't." The room suddenly felt colder. Jack realized something terrifying. This man wasn't military. And somehow, that made him even more dangerous. The civilian opened a folder containing aerial photographs. Destroyed islands. Burned cities. Ships torn apart by bombing. Then he slid one final photo across the table. Jack's blood froze. It showed an entire test fleet obliterated around a single point in the ocean. The ships closest to the center had simply vanished. "What is this?" The man lit another cigarette slowly. "The future," Jack whispered. "That's impossible." "No," the man replied quietly. "It's inevitable." For the next 48 hours, Jack was isolated aboard the carrier. No communication. No missions. No conversations. He replayed the explosion endlessly in his mind. Finally, he was released with strict orders never to discuss the operation. The war continued. Okinawa burned. Pilots died daily. Bombers blackened the skies. But something inside Jack had changed. Before, he believed war was brutal but understandable. Men fought. Men died. Countries won. Now he feared humanity had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And months later, when news reached the Pacific Fleet about Hiroshima, Jack nearly dropped his coffee cup. The newspaper headline read, "One bomb destroys entire city." The description matched the white flash perfectly. The same unnatural light. The same impossible power. Around him sailors cheered. "The war's over. We finally got them." "Hell yes." But Jack felt sick. He walked outside alone to the carrier deck. Far across the ocean, the sun was setting blood-red behind the clouds. Tommy Ruiz's voice echoed in his memory. "Think people like us ever really go home after this?" At the time, Jack laughed. Now he finally understood. Some men survived war physically, but parts of them stayed trapped there forever. 1946, Iowa. The war hero returned home wearing medals he no longer cared about. The town welcomed him like a celebrity. Marching bands filled the streets. Children waved flags. Newspapers called him the Falcon of the Pacific. People wanted stories. They wanted heroism, victory, glory. Jack gave them smiles instead of truth. Because the truth was harder. The truth smelled like burning metal and blood. The truth sounded like screaming over radios that suddenly went silent forever. At night, he sat alone on the farm porch staring at the sky. His mother noticed immediately. "You don't sleep anymore." Jack shrugged. "Just getting used to being home." But he wasn't home. Not really. Part of him was still flying over black oceans with tracers ripping through clouds. Part of him was still circling Tommy's burning wreckage in the Philippines. And part of him was still watching that impossible white explosion bloom beneath storm clouds. One evening his younger sister Emily approached carefully. "You know, people here think you're a hero." Jack laughed bitterly. "Heroes are dead men people got lucky enough to photograph smiling." Emily frowned. "You shouldn't talk like that. You didn't see what I saw." "No," she answered softly. "But I see what it's doing to you." Jack had no reply. Months later, he accepted Lockheed's offer to test experimental aircraft in California. The farm felt too quiet, too slow. He needed engines. Noise. Speed. Anything loud enough to drown the memories. California changed everything. The future was arriving rapidly. Jet engines. Radar systems. New military technology. Pilots spoke about breaking the sound barrier like cowboys once spoke about crossing deserts. Jack became obsessed again. Flying was the only time his mind felt clear. Only in the sky could he outrun the ghosts. One afternoon at Muroc Army Airfield, he watched another pilot attempt a dangerous high-speed dive in an experimental aircraft. The plane disintegrated midair. Thousands of metal fragments rained across the desert. Everyone stood frozen. Jack lit a cigarette silently. A young engineer beside him whispered, "Jesus!" Jack exhaled smoke slowly. "That's the price of tomorrow." The engineer glanced at him nervously. "How do you stay so calm?" Jack stared toward the wreckage. "Because after war, fear changes shape." 1947. At a USO dance in Los Angeles, Jack met Eleanor Whitmore. She wore a blue dress and laughed with her whole heart. For the first time in years, Jack felt something other than exhaustion. They danced until midnight. She asked what flying felt like. Jack thought carefully before answering. "Like freedom mixed with terror." She smiled. "That sounds poetic." "No," he replied quietly. "It sounds honest." Unlike most people, Eleanor never treated him like a celebrity. She didn't care about medals. She cared about silence. About the haunted look in his eyes when airplanes passed overhead. One night, she found him sitting awake on the kitchen floor at 3 a.m. gripping an unloaded pistol. His hands trembled violently. "There was fire everywhere," he whispered. "I couldn't save them." She sat beside him silently until sunrise. And somehow, that mattered more than any words. They married 6 months later. Jack genuinely believed love might save him. For a while. It almost did. 1948 to 1950. Civilian aviation exploded after the war. Pan American Airways hired Jack immediately. Soon he was flying luxurious clippers across oceans once filled with submarines and burning wreckage. Passengers admired him constantly. Children asked for autographs. Women flirted shamelessly with the handsome war ace pilot. But none of them saw the truth. Every time turbulence shook the aircraft, Jack's pulse spiked instantly. Every engine noise reminded him of combat damage. Every dark ocean beneath the wings reminded him of all the men who never returned. Still, he kept flying. Because grounded pilots think too much. And thinking was dangerous. Then Korea began. June 1950. War returned like an old disease. Jack watched television coverage in silence. Young American pilots were dying now in jet combat over Korea. Faster aircraft. Deadlier weapons. Younger men. The Air Force contacted him within weeks. "We need experienced combat leaders." Eleanor begged him not to go. "Jack, please." He looked at their sleeping son across the room. "I have to. You already gave them enough." But deep down Jack knew something terrible. War was the only place he fully understood himself anymore. And that frightened him more than enemy bullets ever had.